Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the flickering firelight of a Roman military camp, somewhere out in the Empire's endless expanse. The air hums with the kind of expectant silence that soldiers carry when they aren't on the march, but also aren't entirely off duty either. Fires glow like sleepy lanterns, shadows stretch long across makeshift tents, and you lucky visitor are about to wander in with the perfect excuse. The Romans ordered extra cheese tonight, and somehow, you've been invited. It's a strange story, one that history barely noticed, but maybe that's why it works so nicely for drifting off. Asterisk, I do need to warn you, you probably wouldn't survive this. Not in a really dire way, no worries, but if you were suddenly dropped here in sandals, with no Wi-Fi, and only a wedge of aged sheep's cheese to support you, you'd be crying for Uber Eats in half an hour, and Roman Uber Eats. That's just a slower soldier who can walk. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Asterisk. And while you're here, comment below and tell me where in the world you are, and the local time when you're listening. Knowing someone is curled up in Boston at 1 a.m. while another listener is gently nodding off in Melbourne at mid-afternoon makes this cozy little traveling campfire circle feel shared. Asterisk. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Asterisk. The ground beneath you is not soft. It's a flattened blend of dirt and dry grass, just packed hard enough by the feet of 1,000 men to make it clear, this is no picnic spot. The soldiers don't seem to mind. They've rolled out straw mats or soft cloaks, some directly on the earth, and lean against their shields as if they were rustic benches. It almost feels like a music festival, except everyone here works for the same awkwardly strict boss, and the headline act is Bedtime before the big march. Asterisk. The faint clatter of pots tells you where to look. The makeshift kitchens, a loose ring of campfires where legionaries ladle out grain porridge into shallow bowls. They are practical men, built for marching, but you can't help noticing the little sparks of humanity in their busy hands. Some dip chunks of stale, flour-thick bread into bubbling pots, others grate bits of hard, salty cheese over the top, as though they've just invented an Italian restaurant chain. Asterisk. Cheese, as it turns out, is foundational here. Romans carried blocks of it as diligently as weapons. It was sturdy, high in protein, and most importantly, difficult to ruin, unlike fish or fruit. Tonight, a particularly generous supply convoy left them with enough to hand out slabs instead of slivers. And in a world without dessert carts, this is practically a feast. You catch their excitement. Rations are fine, but abundance, even a little taste of it, makes the whole group softer, chattier, more human. Asterisk. You stroll slowly, taking in the details that cling to the air. The sharp tang of sheep's milk cheese mingles with the wood. Somewhere nearby, a soldier whistles part of a marching tune, off-key and lacking enthusiasm. Another bursts into laughter after tossing a pebble at his friend's helmet. A private rebellion against the pure discipline that normally weighs over the camp. For just this night, the mood is lighter, softened by the promise of a belly not entirely hungry. Asterisk. The brass-studded armor glints softly in the firelight, but most of it is piled beside bedrolls, ignored for the night. Cloaks drape heavily over men's shoulders as the cool darkness settles. You realize the Romans invented their own form of controlled relaxation, a circle of tents, beds, and centurion watch rotations that turn vulnerability into something closer to routine comfort. It's not luxurious by any stretch, but it works. Asterisk. And then a thought hits you. This empire stretched from desert dust to icy forests. How often were these same camp scenes repeated? 1,000 times, all over. Did soldiers in far-off Germania snack on cheese while their cousins camped in dusty Judea did the same thing? Did they trade cheese jokes like trading cards, connected by Kurds in ways the Senate itself might not have considered? Historians still wonder whether it was stricter discipline or simple rations that kept the army moving so long. Perhaps it was both, bound mysteriously in an army-sized picnic. Asterisk, as you sit with them, you also realize Roman humor has not aged particularly well. A soldier near you makes an exaggerated joke about goats being better officers than men, sparking ridicule that rolls around the circle. Another quips that cheese wedges are sharper than their centurion's sword in exaggeration, obviously, but you can see why laughter is more nourishing here than even the food. Sleep seeps into their conversations and pauses, yawns, and drooping eyelids caught blinking in the fire glow. Your own body starts to sag a little too, lulled by the visible combination of routine and ease. You watch one legionary methodically fold his cloak to create the world's lumpiest pillow. Another sets his ration bag near his head, clearly worried some sneaky comrade might pilfer hard cheese in his sleep. A strange level of trust and suspicion lives hand in hand here, deeply bonded men watching everything, even as they prepare for dreams, no doubt set inside the walls of Rome itself. Asterisk, there is a stillness, a rhythm now, like a slow song with the chorus yet to come. The legion settles into its slumberous pattern. Soft snores from one tent, the crack of another log in the fire, the shifting of boots in the dirt. You stand right inside the edge of history, but instead of declarations, campaigns, or generals, it's almost tendermen tucking themselves into bed, while a distant empire, utterly enormous, briefly pauses. Asterisk, the hum of the camp moves into you, like a background lullaby, mixing with the smell of burning pine and sheep's cheese. The kind of lullaby that historians forget to mention. And you think, if Rome did fall, in the end, wasn't it because even empires need to fall asleep? The fires are dimmer now, but the smells remain persuasive. You walk slowly through the camp, your nose working harder than your feet. There's bread everywhere, fibrous, tough, baked hard enough that a Roman baker might proudly claim it could double as roofing tile. Still, once softened with porridge, or smudged with oil, it is strangely appealing. Soldiers peel chunks from round loaves, their fingers dusted with wheat flour, balancing it against wedges of cheese, asterisk the cheese, though that's the star performer tonight. Sharp, tangy bites of sheep's milk, mingling with softer undertones of goat. You notice how its very presence seems to brighten men's moods. Soldiers closed off at first are suddenly talkative, running their hands over wooden bowls in little ritual cleaning motions before cutting slabs with their daggers. The sound of a blade slicing through firm cheese is oddly satisfying, like tearing construction paper in a quiet classroom. Asterisk, it's not glamorous, but it does have the feel of ceremony. These men, hardened to war, react as if issued jewelry. They cradle their slices carefully, like a cheese ration were a small fortune. For a night, strategy, maps, and orders are replaced entirely by flavor, sour, salty, leathery, and comforting in a way that only food can be when it promises strength for tomorrow. Asterisk. If you were a modern nutritionist transported into this moment, you'd probably start passing out pamphlets. Gentlemen, please consider adding leafy greens. Calcium is grand, but vitamins help? Still, Romans weren't fussy eaters. They took what the empire's logistics gave them, and tonight, fortune rolled dairy. Some historians debate whether cheese was carried more regularly than salted pork for long marches. Records argue, contradict, and contradict again. But standing near the glowing embers, watching men's shoulders slacken as they chew, you wonder if consistency mattered less than familiarity, a small bite that tasted like home. Asterisk, you crouch near one fire, and the atmosphere is half supper, half comedy club. A soldier lifts his ration like a toast and calls out, "Tonight, we feast like emperors. Bread, cheese, and nothing else." The circle erupts in whistles and clucking sounds, ancient sarcasm, alive and well. You chuckle too, although someone immediately turns and notices you holding your peace awkwardly. asking why you've barely nibbled. You dodge the question. It's possibly best not to explain that most of your meals usually involve refrigeration. Asterisk in the background. A centurion strolls by. His armor catches stray sparks from firelight, flashing like coins momentarily. He surveys the camp, pausing at each circle, ensuring men are fed, relaxed. But not so relaxed they forget tomorrow brings marching boots and organized formations. His eyes linger sternly, but then he accepts a pinch of cheese himself. Power doesn't completely erase appetite. Asterisk, the deeper you breathe, the more the smells and tastes weld themselves to the night air. There's charred bread crusts smoldering, sharp notes of vinegar wine uncorked to wash food down, and faint mustiness of wool cloaks. It's honest, cluttered simplicity so different from the carefully curated cheese plates you might see at home with jam glazes and labels. Here, you stab, chew, and survive. It feels right. Asterisk, a younger soldier boasts that the cheese reminds him of his mother's farm in Umbria. An older one interrupts, teasing that his mother's goats probably ran away. The group laughs, warmth rising like steam, while another adds in a muttered sort of pride. Bread and cheese, the true Roman walls, stronger than stone. You notice how the men nod, because even though Rome is famous for marble and aqueduct arches, at the end of the day its empire is built one bite, one ration, one weary soldier's belly at a time. Asterisk, you crouch a little more, listening to the low buzz of their talk and thinking, isn't it odd, the world remembering emperor's decrees, but never the sound of hundreds of men slicing cheese in unison by firelight. Yet here you are, capturing it, in the quiet corner of your mind. Asterisk, the centurion coughs gently, and like a ripple across a pond, the chatter softens. Soldiers know their laughter needs to dim eventually, letting the night win. Fires sink lower, and cheese is tucked into satchels again, wrapped in scraps of wool cloth. A few clever ones wedge slices in their helmets for morning, a method that feels both practical and faintly disgusting. Asterisk, you take a last inhale, savoring the bread's dust, the sour tang invisible comforts packed inside this wide, restless empire, and for a flickering instant, you wonder if Rome's true secret weapon was organized logistics, or simply teaching an army how to dream while chewing. The night drapes itself heavier across the camp, stars dusted lazily above like crumbs on a tablecloth. You adjust your stride, slowing even more, drawn toward the sight of armor stacked deliberately beneath tilted shields. The air isn't sharp, but there's a chill that persuades men to pull cloaks higher, knotting the corners around their shoulders. Asterisk, Roman armillerica, with its polished strips of ironous, formidable in daylight, gleaming like a declaration, but at night, abandoned beside bedrolls, it looks oddly delicate. You pause over one pile, a helmet upside down, catching the light so it becomes a shallow bronze bowl, reflecting flames and starlight together. Beside it lies a soldier's cloak, thick enough to double as both mattress and blanket. Together, the pair speak softly, of contrast steel meant for battle, wool meant for sleep. The most practical bedtime arrangement, yet strangely touching. Asterisk, cloaks ripple like dull-colored waves where soldiers already stretch out on straw mats, legs draped casually from beneath the fabric, toes sticking into the cool air. You catch the faint sound of one sandal falling loose against the earth with a dry thud, unheard by its owner, whose snores start promptly. Even professional soldiers collapse once their bellies are warm. You realize the camp is, in essence, a giant slumber party, only instead of pajamas and pizza, there are uniform cloaks, ration crumbs, and a few coins hidden beneath pillows, made of shields. Asterisk, the shields rectangular, curved scutiform semi-private barriers. Some lean against them, backs flat as if on a park bench. Others tuck themselves behind them, like tents made of wood and leather, securing not so much privacy as the comforting illusion of it. Soldiers imitate walls around themselves, because even inside temporary fortifications, it feels soothing to draw boundaries for sleep. The thing you notice most is texture. Creased wool, chipped wood, the faint scratches on armor that once gleamed on parade grounds, but now carries the personal history of scuffles, training, and half-forgotten rain. Closing your eyes, you can almost hear the rustling chorus of cloaks against straw, clinking metal arranged deliberately closer to hands. Just in case, a trumpet insists on waking everyone earlier than sunrise. One soldier half-jokes while rolling into his cloak. May Jupiter bless my back, because this ground surely won't. His tent mate chuckles in reply, urging him to pray for his nose instead, since the hard cheese may stage its own revenge by morning. Laughter crackles once more, dying as quickly as it arose. Then, their eyelids fold shut, voices dissolve, and silence wins the joke. Historians write tens of thousands of words about Roman armor, their weight, how soldiers practiced, their battlefield significance. Rarely is anyone quoted about how awkward the stuff was to sleep near. Did the occasional shift of iron plates clatter enough to wake neighbors? Did moss creep under buckles when rain soaked the ground? We don't have all the answers, and there's something tender in that unknowing. It leaves room for imagination, like picturing polished breastplates stacked accidentally upside down, filling quietly with falling dew as men dream nearby. You look around, struck by the strangeness of it, the sharp outlines of objects born for war, softened and humbled by night's blanket. A gladius leaning point down in dirt looks less fierce now, like a neglected garden tool. Helmets, resting, no longer glower more bowls than battle. Sleep has transformed the symbol of might into domestic clutter. Wandering further, you pass men stretched so contentedly they might as well be opera stars, Medaria arms wide, snoring into the stars. Others curl tight in cloaks, compact and careful. Everyone arranges themselves uniquely, suggesting that whatever Rome demanded of conformity in daylight, sleep permits individuality after dark. And though you sense safety in numbers, there is still vulnerability here. Hundreds of men, armor nearby but not on, drifting into lifeless quiet. Empires are built on such fragile patterns. How curious that so much depended on moments just like these thousands of soldiers, sprawled side by side, all trusting the same cloak to defend them from the cold. One younger soldier props his head on his shield, attempts settling down, then bursts into a stifled laugh. His companion mutters, "What's funny?" The reply, "We march for emperors, conquer lands. And yet tonight, my pillow is government property." The second man grunts, unimpressed. "But you're certain he'll repeat the joke in another camp later?" As your eyes linger on the shapes of bedroom, you realize this mix of hardness and softness, the clash of battle gear against wool comfort, is precisely what sustained the Roman machine. They were endlessly adaptable. Shields at dawn, blankets at dusk. Soldiers could turn from warriors into sleepers in under an hour, and then back again at the sound of a trumpet. The durability of empire was mirrored by the flicking on and off of soldierly duty, measured in breaths and snores. The fire nearest you wanes further, coals glowing in amber quiet. Cloaks rise and fall gently with breath, metal lies unmoving. You feel your own shoulders lower, weighed softly in sympathy. It feels safe here, oddly cozy, as if the very empire has stretched its cloak over all of you. The deeper you wander into the camp, the more you notice how dinner slowly turns into ritual. Everything is organized, yet loose in its rhythm, like a song with too many choruses. Men are still eating, though now it is with fewer jokes and more long pauses, as hunger gives way to satisfaction. You find yourself seated on a wobbly wooden stool that looks like it might prefer retirement, but for now it creaks under your weight, while a soldier ladles you a portion. Wheat porridge, steaming faintly, thick with the smell of roasted grain and something faintly soured. The Romans called it poles. Not glamorous, but it does the trick. Asterisk the ladle dips again, scooping up a darker glob from the bottom, evidence that, even in antiquity, no one has ever enjoyed scraping a cooking pot. The soldier shrugs, hands you the bowl anyway, as if the charred bits are character. Beside it, he presses a slab of cheese into your hand. No etiquette here. Your dagger is for double duty. You slice, you stir, and for a moment, you dine just like a leggy, O-N-A-R-Y. Asterisk the first bite surprises you. Poles tastes earthy, like warm grain and wood smoke mixed together. The cheese, hard enough that you worry about your teeth, softens once grated into the porridge. The fusion isn't haute cuisine, but it's something else, a meal engineered not for beauty or culinary awards, but for survival and practicality. And yet somehow, maybe because of the smoky night, or the company of so many cloaked men nearby, it tastes good, comforting in the way oatmeal can. Reliable as a song you know all the words to. Asterisk around you. Soldiers clink wooden bowls more than necessary, pretending as if this is fine pottery. One man grins openly while stuffing cheese into bread, as if performing the ancient Roman prototype of the grilled cheese sandwich. He offers you a piece, joking that it's only for heroes. You accept politely, choosing not to explain that to millennia later. People still revere cheese and bread together. Some truths outlast empires. Asterisk. There's a rhythm to the group meal you can't miss. Soldiers sit hunched on stools, or flat on the ground, shoulders brushing, passing bowls, recutting rations. A camaraderie exists in these motions, stitched tighter by the monotony of military life. You hear it in their voices, stories unwinding themselves in droning tones. Moments shared purely for the comfort of speaking aloud, never mind the content. They joke about the bread being heavy enough to use as a weapon, nod knowingly when someone mentions aching feet, and all seem resigned to the simple fact that this porridge right here is the empire distilled into a bowl. Asterisk, and then it comes another realization. Roman meals like this weren't about indulgence. They were about synchronization. Feeding hundreds of men at once, keeping bellies aligned, meant keeping morale aligned. Historians still puzzle over whether rations were the real glue holding the empire together. Perhaps emperors came and went, generals rose and fell, but pulls and cheese, the reliable constant, scarred Rome across continents. Asterisk 1. Soldier beside you digs his spoon into the porridge with such dramatic flair you nearly laugh. He looks at you, raises a brow, and mutters, "Could use some garum." You nod knowingly, though garum fermented fish sauce might not be quite the sauce you'd crave. The thought alone raises questions. Did soldiers truly love the pungent, salty tang of garum after long marches? Or was it, as some writers suspect, more luxury myth than reality? Historians still argue, and you picture an ancient debate club, one side advocating for garum, the other gagging theatrically. Asterisk, the meal winds on gently. Wine passes from hand to hand, thin, watered, more hydration than celebration. A soldier raises his mug and proposes a toast to the cheese gods, which is met by approving chuckles. Toasts tonight are less about conviction and more about filling space between chewing. Asterisk, you lean back slightly, noticing how the camp hum shifts subtly. With soldiers fed, their bodies relaxed more visibly. Eyelids droop during unfinished sentences. Wooden spoons are left clattering in bowls, abandoned mid-scoop as fatigue tugs harder. You sense the liminality of dinner fading into dreams. Asterisk, your stool complains again under your shifting weight, creaking dramatically, almost like it wants attention. A couple soldiers mimic the sound for humor. You think to yourself that even Roman furniture had comedic timing. Perhaps if they'd had theater critics in camp, someone would have written down the reviews. The stool gave an admirable performance in minor key whining. Asterisk, as bowls pile up, cloaks unfold like blankets on the ground once more. The comedy of the meal slips away, replaced by thicker silences. You find it strangely soothing to realize that in 2,000 years, supper has never lost its essential job. Not to nourish, not to wow, but to quiet people into sleep. Asterisk with breadcrumbs in the dirt, soft snores already audible, and the vague tang of sheep's cheese still prickling the air. You understand how armies turned into families eating, yawning, sleeping under shared stars. The camp has settled into a softer hum, and you notice conversations thinning, replaced by the subtler layers of nighttime sound. That's when you begin to notice the centurions, their voices, weaving through the quiet, like discreet conductors making sure this orchestra of half-fed, half-drowsy men doesn't collapse entirely before tomorrow's march. Asterisk orders are whispered now. A centurion bends low near each group, his tone clipped but quiet, as though the words themselves could shatter whatever fragile calm has collected. You watch one of them give instructions to a cluster of men still awake. Rotate the night guard. Check the perimeter. Make sure torches are set in strategic intervals. And yet, when he speaks, the glow of the fire catches the faintest smirk across his face, as though even he secretly knows how absurdly domestic this war machine looks when everyone's cuddled up with breadcrumbs in their cloaks. Asterisk. You hear one distinct order carried through the camp like a fading echo. 2 hours each. No complaints. Short and sharp, detailing the shift for guard duty. The men groan as softly as possible, already knowing whose turn it is. Some shuffle reluctantly to their feet, stretching cloaks tight across shoulders, rubbing eyes awake. Armor is strapped back on with half-hearted efficiency, producing that familiar metallic jostle that wakes sleeping neighbors and earns annoyed grunts. Asterisk, the scene is practical, of course, but it starts to feel oddly serene. You sit silently, watching duty handed out almost like bedtime chores. Historically, the Romans divided the night into 4 watches, and tonight is no different. Time is portioned neatly, rationed like cheese. Everyone knows their role, and in knowing it, everyone relaxes into the structure. It's a little like setting multiple alarms before bed, assurance that even while you drift off, someone else will take responsibility for the darkness. Asterisk, a curious thing strikes you. Though they're whispering orders, the sound blends beautifully with the deeper nighttime chorus. Crickets trill at the edge of camp, creating an ambient hum. Every so often, boots crunch softly across the gravel paths laid by constant marching, and then there are faint spurts of laughter as someone realizes they've forgotten where they stashed their spear, leading to muffled searching beneath cloaks. Asterisk. One centurion pauses near you and mutters in Latin. You don't understand the exact words, but the meaning is clear from his patient sigh and the man's sheepish body language. Someone has, in all seriousness, misplaced part of their armor. You try to suppress a smile, because even in history's most disciplined army, people will always lose their shoes. Asterisk, still, discipline is never absent. After the commotion, centurions pass by quietly again, firm reminders in hushed tones that guards must stay awake. Shields close at hand, even when half the camp is floating in cheese-induced dreams. You reflect on how this organized approach, night after night, may have been the Empire's truest magic trick, transforming large groups of restless humans into well-tuned machines, even after supper. Asterisk, but here's the contrast. Their orders come across in whispers, not barking. There's no night drill, no loud spectacle. The softness of it is almost parental. You can sense the centurion's care as much about protecting sleep as maintaining security. The balancing act of empire at night. Discipline never fully sleeps, but it does lower its volume. Asterisk, you're amused by the irony. Rome commanded lands, built aqueducts, paved roads that remain after 2,000 years. But here, at ground level, the heartbeat of the empire beats in low whispers over glowing embers and sleepy eyes. Asterisk, one soldier mumbles something half asleep, after hearing his friend's name called for guard duty. No one quite catches it, though later, the men nearby giggle. They swear, he grunted. Let the cheese keep watch. It isn't much of a joke, but it instantly becomes the camp's half-hearted legend, passed from one fire ring to another with theatrically exaggerated delivery. The line grows absurd in its retelling. Let the cheese defend the perimeter. Place the cheddar helmets on stakes. Soon muffled snickering spreads silently, until the centurions glare long enough to squash the rebellion with a look. Asterisk, you wonder what instructions were truly like. Did centurions rely more on fear or patience? Were their nighttime talks harsher on long campaigns? Historians debate whether camaraderie outweighed discipline, and here, in this moment, you suspect both thrived because without a shared bond, whispered rules don't work. Orders would need shouting. That they don't. That men rise and march sleepy into the shadows without question, tells you almost everything. Asterisk, the orders remain simple, minimal, repetitious. Rotate, stay awake, watch carefully. Yet behind these whispers is an empire's entire weight. Somehow, your own shoulders lighten hearing them. It's as though even you've been given small instructions. You're safe. You're part of a system. You may rest now, because the watch belongs to someone else. Asterisk, with the last round of murmured checks done, quiet folds across camp once again. Cloaks shuffle once more. Heads settle back. Beyond the perimeter, guards shift and blink into the night. Time carved into watches like slices of cheeses safely accounted for. And now the entire camp exhales into something almost peaceful. Asterisk, the fires sink lower, and the scents of supper fade until only one lingers bold enough to cling to the air. Cheese. Its sharp tang persists, long after breadcrumbs have vanished into the grass, long after wine cups have been drained. It's then that you realize the odd truth: cheese isn't simply a ration here. It's almost a personality unto itself. Asterisk, you shift closer to a group of men chatting in drowsy tones, their voices softened by the heaviness of night. One lifts a hunk of cheese into the air, squinting at its chalky edges, as if he's holding up a rare treasure. Another chuckles and claims it's worth half his pay, while someone else insists it's worth more than the emperor's coin. Everyone makes a grand show, stealing bites with exaggerated reverence. You can't help noticing that this simple dairy product holds their affection in a way golden statues never could. Asterisk. In truth, Roman cheese was more than indulgence. It was comfort, stability, nourishment, and, sometimes, yes, a kind of currency. Archaeologists have uncovered old documents noting pay distributed in food as often as coin, and cheese appears over and over again in the pages of ancient supply lists. Where metal failed, where inflation corrupted coins, cheese filled the gap. You look at the half-dozing group around the fire and wonder how many debts, wagers, and favors across the empire were settled by a lump of sour goat's milk pressed into hardness. It seems absurd, but it makes a perfect kind of sense. Asterisk. The soldiers treat it with the same layering of respect and ridicule that happens with anything sacred. One man brandishes his wedge like a weapon, another pretends to bribe his neighbor, and yet you catch the way they tuck extra pieces carefully into satchels before lying back. No one jokes when it's time to store away food for tomorrow. Maybe cheese is both, the clown of the ration bag and the king of it, depending on how empty your stomach feels. Asterisk. There's a story shared around the circle, a tale of a certain cohort nearly revolting when promised extra food but given fewer cheese rations. Bread, yes. Pulses, yes. But when the cheese ran short, loyalty itself thinned. It may be exaggerated, like all campfire tales, yet it hints at a truth scholars often miss, that power rests not on monuments alone, but in what men eat when the sun goes down. You're reminded of a modern phrase: an army marches on its stomach, and here, the stomach seems to march specifically on dairy. Asterisk. One soldier, propped on his elbow, tells you proudly, He can tell the difference between cheeses from Italy and those from Gaul just by smell. His friend calls him a liar, daring him to blindfold the claim. And within minutes, the camp is half asleep and half howling at his confusion over goat milk versus cow. It's such a small, ridiculous moment, the kind of thing not recorded by Livy or Tacitus, and yet surely essential to what made Rome human. Historians still puzzle over just how much. Roman logistics depended on cheese, compared with dried meats, grains, or legumes. No definitive answer exists, though records scatter clues. Did commanders prioritize certain foods for morale rather than nutrition? Was a wedge really worth the trouble of hauling across Alps and battlefronts? Your own guess, as you watch soldiers drifting to sleep with ration bags clutched tightly, is yes. Not because it was logical, but because comfort rarely is, at least not on paper. Asterisk. The soundscape folds into this truth. The occasional crunch of someone nibbling, asterisk, just one more bite, asterisk, before finally surrendering their portion. The rustle of wool as bags are tied shut. The thin sigh of men satisfied that their most valuable possession in the world tonight is tucked safely under their heads. Asterisk. You stifle a laugh imagining cheese contracts signed in wax. Merchants arguing over curd-to-weight ratios. Legion paydays devolving into disputes about who got the bigger wedge. Maybe it explains why Romans loved laws so much. Someone had to invent bylaws for dairy distribution. Asterisk, and for a fleeting instant, you think of today, cafes in Europe, still proudly serving wheels of hard cheese, wedges wrapped in paper, from street markets. The continuity is startling. Maybe every bite you've ever tasted, from a sharp cheddar block, carries, invisibly, the faint echo of Rome's soldiers, sleeping with similar wedges pressed to their sides like edible security blankets. Asterisk. The camp grows quieter now. Fires slip into soft coals. A far-off guard coughs into the night. But closer to you, the last fences of conversation cling to dairy. Cheese has proven itself versatile. Food, money, comedy, morale. In a world shaped by marble columns and iron swords, it is this homelier treasure that seems the true glue of empire. Asterisk. And as silence truly wins, leaving only breathing and crickets, you realize you're laying comfortably in history's oddest inheritance, a world empire that, at least for one night, balanced entirely on bread cloaks and a few stubbornly pungent blocks of cheese. The camp has dwindled into soft, predictable rhythms, crickets, ticking time, snores overlapping like sleepy horns in an orchestra. It seems nothing stirs now but the embers, until a ripple of laughter drifts over from a still awake group. You sidle closer, curious only to discover that in the absence of fighting or marching, Roman soldiers are indulging in their other timeless pastime, telling jokes, and yes, tonight, they're mostly about cheese. Asterisk. One soldier stands dramatically, holding up a wedge like it's a sacred scroll. He points to it with mock authority. This cheese is braver than half of you. The group howls with laughter, one man clutching his stomach before coughing himself back into silence. Another soldier quickly responds. That may be true, but it still melts faster. More cackling, almost loud enough to summon a glare from a nearby centurion, who mutters something under his breath that is either Latin for quiet down or absolutely not funny. Asterisk. Jokes this simple, this corny, shouldn't be so funny in the open Roman night. And yet they are. Maybe it's the wine moving quietly through their bloodstreams. Maybe it's the long exhaustion, finally unraveling after miles of marching. Or maybe comedy works best when the bar is set low. And this bar tonight, as low as a soldier, pretending he challenged a goat to a duel because it stole his cheese ration. Asterisk. You can't help wondering, were Roman jokes always this, dairy-focused? Ancient writings survive of their humor, sometimes cruel, sometimes clever, but rarely do we get the mundane quips. Maybe history preserved emperors' decrees, lost cities, court gossip, but not the daily giggles of exhausted men tearing at bread crusts. What sarcasm was whispered at Hadrian's Wall? What running gag echoed in North Africa camps? Historians will never know, and that feels unfair, because humor is as essential here as discipline, maybe more so. Asterisk the soldier with the goat story embellishes wildly. The beast looked me in the eye, challenged my honor, and he pauses dramatically. I withdrew, because I feared the goat had better armor. The joke's delivery is clumsy, the punchline weak, but everyone laughs regardless. Somewhere between stifled giggles, one man nearly drops his wine cup from shaking shoulders. You grin too, realizing that laughter spreads not because the material is strong, but because the desire to laugh is stronger than the ration itself. Asterisk it's plain to see, this humor is survival, just as crucial as porridge or leather sandals. Yes, the cheese fills their bellies, but laughter bad jokes and offloods their spirits. A curious comparison springs up in your own modern thinking. Many soldiers today share memes or silly nicknames in moments between drills. This is the Roman version jokes, where food itself becomes the entire punchline. Asterisk one soldier, fiddling with a bread crust, announces, "If this porridge gets any thicker, we'll march on spoons tomorrow." His immediate neighbor groans audibly, the kind of theatrical groan that signals appreciation cloaked in mock disgust. It triggers low chuckles, then actual tears in the eyes of a particularly tired man nearby. The night turns a little warmer for it. The dense Roman silence softened by giggling. Asterisk, and yet, beneath the humor, there's tenderness as well. You catch the way their smiles linger, even as words fade, anchored in the reassurance that they've shared laughter tonight. That may be why historians never record these jokes, because to the soldiers, they weren't frivolous moments. They were necessary glue, the simplest thread keeping loneliness at bay. Asterisk, a quieter soldier finally murmurs a gentle line, almost like a lullaby, "Laugh while you can, for in battles, no cheese will be." It sounds heavier than intended, so quickly another quips, "Then I will retreat, unless the enemy provides parmesan," and the mood bounces upward again. It's not just humor, it's a balancing act. Too much gloom, they answer with absurdity. Too much absurdity, they ground it in honesty again. Asterisk historians still debate whether Roman soldiers maintained similar humor on long campaigns, whether this playful banter was universal or culture-specific. Was humor standardized as discipline was, shared from fort to fort? Or did each army form its own jokes, its own inside languages of cheese and bread? The truth is uncertain, but tonight, it matters little. Asterisk, you ease yourself down on a cloak nearby, shoulders brushing another's, and in the intimacy of the fire, you sense something important. This is not Rome the conqueror, Rome the bureaucrat, Rome the marble statue. This is Rome the bedtime clown, weaving dairy and fatigue into the silliest stories imaginable, warming the soul for ages. Asterisk eventually, laughter subsides, and the soldiers quiet themselves with lingering smiles. Heads bob, eyelids sink. The camp creaks back into silence, a silence somehow fuller, because even the remnants of silly words hang like smoke over the men, and you curl into that silence too, hushed, softened by humor that feels human enough to survive the centuries. By now, the camp has fully exhaled into its nighttime rhythm. Fires have dwindled to shallow beds of glowing coals. Heavy cloaks ripple faintly with the breeze, and most soldiers have collapsed into their own symphony of snores. Still, not everyone is asleep. You wander a little closer to one group of men who are determined to carry on, not with jokes this time, but with games. Asterisk, a soft scraping sound greets you, the rattle of dice across a worn wooden board. Two soldiers, illuminated by the orange underglow of nearly extinguished logs, lean over their improvised table. Their brows crease in mock seriousness. the way gamblers always do when the stakes seem higher than they really are. Beside them, a modest pile of bread crusts, copper coins, and yes, bits of cheese form the winnings. In this tiny corner of the empire, dairy has once again doubled as currency. Asterisk, the dice themselves, carved from bone, clink smoothly on the wood. You notice one die has slightly uneven edges, probably favoring certain rolls. The owner insists otherwise, though his friend glares at the object as if it's a conspirator in the night. The debate sparks soft laughter, tethering even nearby men back from sleep. And in that laughter, you realize how these games are less about winning and more about waking up the quiet, just enough to keep drowsiness at bay until their guard shifts. Asterisk 1. Soldier theatrically pretends to blow on the dice for luck. Another mutters a short prayer, half serious, to Fortuna herself, asking that if she insists on ruining battles, then she may at least be generous with dice. A few nearby chuckle, pretending to bow in mock ceremony to Fortuna, goddess of gambling, cheese, or whatever domain she covers tonight. The dice roll, double sixes, groans, mutters, laughter all over again. Asterisk, of course. Cards as we know them were centuries away, but Romans had their gaming equivalents diced knucklebones, little board games scratched into stone when walking outposts. Here, in the dirt of this camp, they improvise freely, carving distraction out of boredom. Historians still argue whether too much gambling was discouraged violently or tolerated as a harmless relief. But in this moment, you sense that the centurions quietly allow it because cheerfully distracted soldiers are less likely to complain about sore feet. Asterisk. The smell of charred firewood clings to your cloak now, blending with the sharper note of hard cheese as one soldier carefully trades a bite as his wager. Bread, coins, dairy, the three standard currencies of nighttime entertainment. And when he loses and he does, his groan is not entirely pretend. Watching his opponent gnaw on the winnings, he cries dramatically. The emperor himself could not resist gambling this wheel of fortune. Cue more stifled laughter, which fades when someone nearby shushes them before order is fully lost. Asterisk. You think to yourself, this is what history rarely preserves. Soldiers killing time, not enemies. Their moments of levity balanced against days of tension. Their boredom patched over with dice scratches in dirt. If anyone wrote down these casual routines, they were likely dismissed by later readers as trivial. And yet, sitting here, these shallow games feel as monumental to morale as any speech from a general. Asterisk, the clacking of dice continues. Soothing in its rhythm, you let the sound mesmerize you. Tick, clack, roll. A lullaby, faint but steady. Some soldiers, lying nearby, half watch with eyes heavy and heads drooping, basking in the quiet as if listening to bedtime percussion. You start to realize the sound plays the same role as modern white noise machines. Reliable, repetitive, strangely calming after a while. Asterisk then, one soldier mutters gloomily, Fortuna never favors me. So another quips, maybe she prefers goats. The group cracks up again, circling right back to their earlier goat jokes about cheese. Even their games inevitably wander back to food. It's as if their rations have infiltrated their minds entirely. Perhaps that's the way armies work. When something dominates your survival, it dominates your comedy, too. Asterisk, curiosity creeps in. Did commanders ever worry that soldiers might gamble away too much? Did cheese create black markets within camps? Historians can't say for sure, though scattered reports suggest men indeed haggled food to supplement their rations, swapping flavors to console homesick mouths. Tonight is no different, except it's wrapped in laughter instead of rules. Asterisk, soon the clatter grows lazier, wagers diminish. Someone sighs long, declaring last round, though no one looks at victories with much triumph. Bread is tucked back into bags, coins hidden in leather pouches. The game dissolves, giving way finally to silence. Soldiers lean back against shields, or stretch flat into cloaks. Conversations drift into quiet sighs. The dice lie abandoned, a bone beneath the stars. Asterisk, you remain still, enjoying the faint echo of laughter against the dark, and the sense that you've just watched history's sleepiest casino close for the night. The fires are truly dying down now, smoke curling upward like ribbon, wrapping itself into the first weight of dreams that seems to blanket the entire camp. The dice clatter fades fully, replaced by the deeper quiet of the countryside. Now the sounds beyond the camp begin to slip in thin and distinct as lines drawn in the darkness. You wander toward the edges where the last torches flicker, guarded by men pacing in slow, deliberate strides. Their spears glimmer faintly, but otherwise the night belongs not to soldiers, but to the animals. Asterisk, and there it is, the low, haunting hoot of an owl, drawn long across the still air. The noise slides into the camp like a thread of sound, resting lightly on the tent tops, perched in men's ears just enough to intrigue the half-awake. The younger soldiers lift their heads fractionally at it, whispering half-sentences, while the older ones shrugged softly and closed their eyes again. Asterisk owls carried omens for the Romans, a good sign or a bad one, depending on timing, place, and interpretation. Some believed the bird was a herald of misfortune, flapping before battles with predictions too accurate for comfort. Others found its call protective, as if the night itself had stationed one more guard on the perimeter, silent and feathered. Tonight the omen feels ambiguous, which arguably is perfect for bedtime. Asterisk, you pause, hearing it again who, slow and rhythmic. It's less ominous and more hypnotic when repeated, like a sleepy metronome. Most men, already pressed into their cloaks, don't bother declaring whether it's fortune or disaster. Instead, they incorporate the call into their dreams, ears tugging it into sleep's rhythm, the way modern listeners might drift off amid a fan's constant whir. Asterisk. One soldier stirs, however, sitting half upright, muttering something about a bad sign. His friend, too tired to humor him, simply grumbles. Then let the cheese protect us. And yes, unbelievably, hard cheese manages yet another cameo as a sacred protector. The first man chuckles through his own suspicion, lies back down, and drifts off. Asterisk, but for a lingering moment, you realize how important these interpretations were. If you believed the owl was a curse, you might carry unease into dream and wake troubled. If you believed it meant good luck, you'd rest easier. An entire night's rest hinged on how one chose to hear the woods. Historians still debate how far soldiers leaned into superstition versus practical shrugging. No definitive answer persists. All we know is that a simple bird call carried weight, shaping the quality of men's sleep. Asterisk, as you let the sound repeat, layered now with crickets in their endless chorus, you begin to feel a softness in it yourself. The owl becomes not a prophet, but a nighttime guide. It feels less like foreboding and more like permission to rest, a steady rhythm saying, yes, stay down, tuck closer. Let darkness keep what it must. Asterisk, the sky stretches so wide above the camp that you can feel Rome itself shrink to something fragile, stretched under infinity. Stars crowd together, tracing patterns familiar to you, but perhaps telling entirely different stories to the legionaries lying at your side. To them, these shapes are Jupiter's stage, Mars's domain, Venus's delicate path. To you, they're somber pinpoints that make the smell of cheese and the groaning of dice feel endearingly small. Asterisk A. Nearby guard shifts his weight, spear knocking against his shield softly, the sound carrying like a brief tone of alarm, but no one wakes. Trust is thick here. If something in the woods were truly a threat, the guard would react differently. The owl hoots once more, long and mellow, and even the guard himself sighs, leaning against his spear, his eyelids flutter dangerously close to dropping. You hope he stiffens up again soon. Asterisk, the owl's calling grows slower, pauses between calls, stretching longer. Your chest rises with the silence, your breath sinking unwittingly with the distances in between. It becomes a replacement for lullabies, where one soldier has porridge in his belly and another has coin hidden under his cloak. You find yourself clutching only the sound of feathers moving unseen overhead. Asterisk. Some days in Rome must have felt impossibly loud, forums bursting with shouts, markets clattering with wheels and calls of vendors. Yet here you are, on the margins of empire, where silence and owls and crickets do the speaking. Strangely, it feels deeper. Monumental things fall quieter than people think. Asterisk. One final owl call stretches across the night. This time no soldier comments, no one stirs. Even you simply sigh, allowing it to be folded gently into the fabric of sleep. Whatever omen it carried, good, bad, or neither, the empire has already chosen not to argue. They're dreaming instead, trusting that cheese and cloaks are enough to carry them through. Asterisk. You linger near the edge where owls and crickets hum, but soon your attention is tugged gently back inward, against to the very heart of the camp, where sleep itself has fully taken command. The soldiers no longer appear as an army. They have melted into the universal form of exhausted humans sprawled under stars, bodies slack, arms crossing instinctively over their own belongings, every shape softened by slumber. Asterisk. The quiet feels heavy, but also tender. You notice how nearly every man has his satchel within arm's reach, many tugged close enough to double as pillows, and in those satchels lie wedges of cheese, tucked away as if precious artifacts, for all the empire's ceremonies and triumphal parades. Here is the simpler reality: men sleeping with their food curled against their sides, because precious is what feeds you next. There's an unintentional sweetness in that image. An empire bedded down by dairy. Asterisk. Breath becomes the loudest sound in the clearing. Deep, rattling snores punctuate the night like low horns, while others murmur sentences half-formed in their dreaming. One soldier shifts violently in sleep, elbowing his neighbor before rolling over and resuming his soundtrack. The other harems into his blanket, but does not move. You smile quietly, because this is the most human of sight. Sleep is always imperfect, even in a camp so strictly disciplined. Asterisk. This moment captures Rome differently than any marble bust. The fragility of men entrusted with empire, now limp and folded. For hours they've carried shields, scrawled orders, marched with exhaustion, and now they resemble nothing more threatening than schoolboys asleep at their desks. It's disarming, really, and soothing. Asterisk. The torches lining the main trench glow faintly. Their smoke fades skyward, visible occasionally when an ember pops. That faint light gives the impression of a sleepy halo surrounding the whole camp, as if Rome itself had drawn a nightlight around its forces. Each soldier, no matter how grizzled, looks small beneath it, claimed back by the same darkness that settles over shepherds, over farmers, over emperors themselves. Asterisk. One soldier nearby clutches his shield to his chest while he sleeps. Another curls his body around his helmet, as though it were a very uncomfortable teddy bear. You can't help but silently narrate the scene, like an overly sentimental guide to an art gallery. Asterisk. And here, in this panel, we observe the Roman legionnaire, ferocious by daylight, affectionate by moonlight, generously sharing his blankets with his own weaponry. Asterisk. If only museums would allow such commentary. Asterisk. Yet there's comfort in knowing that these were not invincible beings of legend, but tired humans who needed proper naps, who occasionally dreamed through orders, who carried odd attachments to cheese and dice. Perhaps what made Rome last so long was not marble or iron, but this unwavering ability to preserve dignity and absurdity at once, even as they snored loudly into the soil. Asterisk. Sleep spreads like a tide. You can almost feel it rolling from tent to tent, wave upon wave, leaving less and less sound behind. There are only a few holdouts, the centurion pacing, a guard repositioning his torch butt. Even they move slowly, as if wrapped in the same fabric of slumber. No one dares pierce the swell of rest now. Asterisk historians often debate whether soldiers clung to routines because they had to, or simply because habit provided comfort. Was this night any different than the thousands of other Roman nights spent in dusty fields and forests? Did the presence of extra cheese make them laugh more, sleep harder, dream sweeter? The records don't answer fully, but watching it unfold, you sense that the smallest comforts, however absurd, mattered more than any marching column or tactical speech. Asterisk. The scent of earth rises softly, mingling with the wool of cloaks. One fire spits faintly now and then, releasing sparks that hover like little wandering stars. Even those sparks seem reluctant to stay awake, winking out as quickly as they appear. No one bothers to toss another log on. The fuel tonight is rest. Asterisk. Your own head begins to feel heavy, sliding gently toward the posture all around you. Every snore blends into the chorus, every exhale tugging your own breathing slower, like an invitation to join. You realize with faint amusement that at this exact moment, history has designed its perfect bedtime story. The empire, the rations, the whispers all muted by the luxury of one rare silence. Asterisk. And somehow, amid cloth and iron, oblivion and dreams, you realize this quiet is the most luxurious item carried in any satchel in camp, more valuable than gold, more nourishing than porridge, rarer than humor. This sleep is the true empire, the luxury of sleep itself. Sleep has spread like dew across the camp, thick and unbroken, but even in this chorus of collapsed bodies, there are still performers awake on stage. You notice the men assigned to guard duty pale, lantern-lit figures drifting along the perimeter with heavy breath and heavier eyelids. Their steps crunched faintly in the dirt, each sound an odd counter-melody to the snores behind them. Asterisk. One guard props his spear upright like a cane, leaning onto it as though he might nod off at any moment. His eyes try to stay fixed on the horizon, though his jaw droops heavily. Another fiddles with his shield strap, adjusting and readjusting, anything to avoid falling into rhythm with the sleepers. These are men forced to resist the pull of dreams, though their entire camp hums with it. And you, standing beside them, feel the struggle so vividly. Who wouldn't want to collapse into cloaks right now? Asterisk. Meanwhile, in the spaces between guard rotations, the soldiers who remain semi-conscious drift into something stranger, the half-state of cheese-fed dreams. A few men mutter, almost with intentionality, as though continuing conversations within their sleep. You hear one whisper, "Tell mother." "Tell her." The goats marched home, drifting promptly into a snore. Another mumbles about dice rolls, his lips twitching like he's still gambling. Dreams have blurred into the combed fabric of the day, playing their surreal mimicry. Asterisk. You catch a particularly endearing sight. One soldier, arm folded protectively on his ration satchel, sighs through what is clearly a dream of dinner. His lips turn upward, faintly chewing in his sleep. Perhaps he revisits the porridge pot, perhaps julienning wedges of hard cheese in a fantastical dream kitchen, worthy of an emperor's feast. His neighbor, woken by the faint chewing motions, grumbles low, but does not disturb him. If nothing else, Roman courtesy extended to dream banquets. Asterisk. The guards exchange glances with gentle humor as they circle back through camp. They always know that their comrades are drifting through bizarre adventures, invisible to the waking eye. And sometimes they whisper little teases over the sleeping soldiers, like commentary. This one conquers gall through cheese alone. Such whisper laughter hums gently, just mischievous enough to remind you, these men aren't machines, but weary humans, cracking humor, even while half steeling themselves against sleep. Asterisk. Historians speculate about Roman dream culture. Soldiers interpret their dreams as omens, or chalk them up to indigestion from rations. A few old writings survive, but little gives a definitive answer. You wonder softly whether this very night was the genesis of those interpretations. Was a dream after too much dairy considered divine, or simply digestive? Scholars can't decide, which may be history's quietest joke. Even empires couldn't tell the difference between prophecy and cheese. Asterisk. You wander further down the sleeping rows, the image almost surreal. Shields gleam dimly, helmets glint, yet beyond them, faces slack and peaceful. A soldier's chest rises with rhythmic certainty. Inhale, exhale, the eternal lull. Against one fire bed, another rolls onto his side, mumbling a single word 3 times. Wine, 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 a wish, a mantra, or nothing more than sleep speech. Either way, it feels sanctified. Asterisk. Meanwhile, the guards stiffen momentarily, spurred by a noise in the trees, perhaps a branch breaking, perhaps only a small animal scurrying unseen. Their spears jerk upright, eyes sharpen, then nothing. They settle, shaking heads at themselves. Confidence returns, with weary relief, though both men now adjust their posts closer to the torches. Their sighs are audible, almost exaggeratedly so. You sense them reassuring not just each other, but themselves. Asterisk. Still safe. Just shadows. Still safe. Asterisk. Asterisk. A faint breeze swells across camp, lifting tassels of cloaks, tossing sparks briefly upward. It draws lighter murmurs from sleepers' dreams, stirred by cold air touching their cheeks. One man rolls over, hugging his shield closer. Another tucks food satchels tighter against his chest. You realize how intimacy with objects, shields, cloaks, lumps of dairy fills the place where softer things are missing. No wives here, no polished couches, just whatever could stand in. Poor substitutes, elevated by necessity. Asterisk. And yet, there's surprising beauty in that. The blending of the practical with the personal. Weapons acted as teddy bears, porridge breath dreams, treated tenderly by nearby soldiers. In such absurdity, you see an empire's humanity peek through. Asterisk. The guards exchange one last muted word. They'll march through until sunrise, until others relieve them, but you sense their eyes aren't just watching horizon threats. Their real guard duty is ensuring sleep itself is unbroken, that the legion, cheesy rations clutched like heirlooms, gets its night intact. And so the paradox becomes gentle truth. The empire survives, not by spears raised, but by spears lowered, silently pacing under stars, all while dreams drift on. The camp has grown so hushed that even whispers carry. And so, when a conversation does stir, it feels enormous, amplified against the silence of hundreds breathing steadily in their cloaks. You stumble upon 2 soldiers, propped lazily against a shield. Their voices barely rise above murmurs, but the topic, a matter of ferocious importance. Goat cheese versus cow cheese. Asterisk. One man gestures dreamily with his hand, as if sketching an invisible wheel of cheese in the air. Goat, he insists. Always goat. Goat makes you sharp, clear-headed, braver. He pokes lightly at the dirt, finishing with conviction. A man who eats goat's cheese fears nothing. Asterisk. The other tilts his head, unimpressed, clutching a much smaller ration of cow cheese. No, he counters. Cow's cheese fills you. Stronger bones, stronger body. What use is bravery when your stomach is empty? He nibbles a piece for emphasis, as if taste alone could prove his argument. Asterisk. Their quiet debate unfolds like a parody of a Senate meeting. You imagine Cicero himself frowning solemnly, weighing dairy as political philosophy. Soldiers snort mid-sleep nearby, and you swear a muffled giggle rises when one of them overhears. The seriousness with which these 2 cloak philosophy into calcium is absurdly charming. Asterisk. Historians spend plenty of energy deciphering Roman doctrines, wars, and reforms. Yet here is the unspoken politics of the camp. Food as identity, ration as metaphor. Tonight, the empire's intellectual amphitheater is not marble, but makeshift stools. Its audience reduced to whoever hasn't yet collapsed. Asterisk, the goat man insists again. Bravery. Goats climb walls. Goats conquer cliffs. Do you want to conquer? Eat goat. Asterisk, the cowman, raising his brows, scoffs. Endurance. Cows carry fields, provide endure heat. Do you want to last? Eat cow? Asterisk, back and forth. The words pause with yawns, silence filling the gaps like punctuation. Two exhausted men salvaging one last ounce of energy to argue dairy politics under fading stars. Asterisk. And what makes the scene irresistible? What makes you stifle a laugh is that their debate is gently dissolving, even as they mutter it. Sentences trail into mumbles. Gestures weaken to half waves. The goat man loses his thread entirely, jaw slack as his head dips. He startles briefly awake, muttering, bravery. Yes, goats. And promptly sinks again. Cowman smiles vaguely, victorious by default, until his mouth slides open in a gentle snore 30 seconds later. Asterisk. Rome's nightly senate adjourned, victory awarded not by persuasion, but by exhaustion. Asterisk. Did soldiers regularly infuse meals and rations with such contests? Historians still wonder whether rivalries between regions, Italian cheese versus Gallic varieties, influenced camaraderie in the army. Was the dairy drawn into friendly jokes, or did true loyalties exist for one type over another? The records are mostly silent. All you know here is that, in the quietest hours of the camp, a minor cheese debate managed to embody the empire's greatest loves: philosophy, rhetoric, and sleep. Asterisk. The argument collapses into snores. One of the men's hands still loosely clutches his cheese, resting it on his chest as though the dairy itself demanded representation even in sleep. The other's wedge has already tipped into the grass, abandoned but unclaimed, a silent peace offering between goats and cows, waiting for the morning sun. Asterisk. You glance at them fondly, struck by the thought that somewhere else in the empire, perhaps another camp, also argued the same question. What ration best made a legionary invincible? Historians will never answer that definitively, but as two well-fed men drift past the threshold of consciousness beneath the watch of torches, you think perhaps the answer was simpler than philosophy suggested. Maybe the best cheese was whichever filled your empty stomach in the dark. Asterisk. The owl hoots once more in the distance, punctuating their surrender, as if the night itself delivers the final ruling. Enough debate. Rest now, and rest, indeed, becomes the only resolution. The night has melted deeper, the coals grown soft and silvery, and now your thoughts drift with the camps, even in slumber. The Legion carries fragments of home in their minds, and the silence seems full of imagined voices, Rome itself faintly echoing here in the darkness. Asterisk. As you lean back against a discarded shield, you close your eyes and picture what they must be picturing: the bustle of the capital, the sound of bakers pounding dough in the early dawn, iron pans clanging as men and women shuffle to buy bread not as hard as these soldiers' rations. Perhaps children weave between stalls, snatching figs or laughing at vendors selling olives in barrels. Out here, the Legion eats porridge and cheese. Out there, a market sprawls like a feast, fragrant with honey cakes and fresh fruit. Asterisk. You can feel how the memory of Rome weaves itself into camp conversations. Earlier in the evening, one soldier muttered wistfully about bread still warm from the oven in Trastevere. Another claimed, with suitable exaggeration, but his neighbor's melon harvest could feed an entire legion if only generals understood farming. These half-nostalgic claims are their lullabies. The big city toned down into bedtime small talk, asterisk. And Rome itself was a city of smells. Imagine them pressed against the sleepier. Fresh loaves mingling with smoke from household hearths. Perfume oils from shop windows, drifting across urine-soaked alleyways. Yes, less glamorous, but more accurate. Citrus peels sliced for wines. Out here in the camp, it reduces to 2 cents only. Wood smoke and dairy. But in their dreams, the full palate returns. Your nose twitches as if you might smell it too, just for a flicker. Asterisk. Superstitions mixed with nostalgia. One soldier swore earlier that falling asleep while imagining home markets would make him dream sweeter dreams. Another countered that thinking of Rome's bustle would only bring nightmares of overcrowded streets. Historians still debate how homesick soldiers were, and whether their longing led to discipline issues, or strengthened their determination. There's no consensus, though here it seems clear. A man with cheese as company is a man who yearns for anything fresher. Asterisk. You catch the faint hum of someone's voice, too soft to be genuine singing, but not quite speech. He's muttering a tiny tune, likely one heard from a tavern back home. His companions stir, half smile, and fall back again. The city's voice has entered the rural night, folded invisibly into his sleepy chant. Asterisk. Rome was far more than war and conquest. It was weekends at the amphitheater, temples glowing, streets narrowing into whispers of gossip. Even miles away, the camp turns into a miniature replica. Fires as ovens, dice as taverns, laughter as performers. And Rome is always present, carried on the soldiers' backs, tucked between their rations, whispering here against the stars. Asterisk. You wonder if this imagined Rome is kinder than the real one. Perhaps soldiers stripped the city of its frustrations in memory, forgetting the stench of blocked drains, remembering only the taste of fresh bread, forgetting corruption, remembering coins, jangling toward dice rolls. It's a kind of selective history. Everyone writes privately at night. Home becomes simpler, sweeter, even sacred, once seen from the distance of the battlefield. Asterisk. A soldier mutters in his sleep, clear enough for you to catch home. Just that one word, stretched long with vowels. His lips rest back into slackness, but the softness in his face suggests that he is walking cobblestones that no march could give him here. Asterisk. You sit with this thought, amazed at the contrast. The most powerful empire in the world, sustained not only by roads and legions, but also by the half-forgotten smell of bakeries, drifting into men's dreams. Asterisk. A guard sneezes beside a torch post, his sneeze cutting sharply across the silence. A few men stir, groan, then collapse again. It's a reminder that Rome's hums of civilization are only ghosts here. Tomorrow, the march continues. Tonight, what they clutch closest is the echo of a city where cheese might actually be fresh, soft, and paired with figs, rather than rationed in chalky lumps. Asterisk. The hush returns. For an empire this vast, it is curious how small it looks by firelight. 100 men dreaming of home just to tolerate the distance. And you, curled in asterisk near them. Almost smell those bakers' ovens yourself. Asterisk. The stars above the camp whisper nothing, but you can feel their endless patience. Down here, where snoring men curl around their cloaks and half-empty satchels, your thoughts linger, not just on Rome's metropolis, but on the strange way that rations humble cheese. Coarse bread, porridge somehow shaped history. Asterisk. For tonight, sitting among these dreamers, you realize food isn't a side note to empire. Food is empire. Roads and aqueducts carried more than troops and trade. They carried cheese wheels, amphorae of oil, sacks of grain. Soldiers survived on these rations, and without them, their shields and swords meant nothing. A few days without cheese and grain, and Rome may have toppled where marble still stood tall. Asterisk. You imagine historians hunched over scrolls, jotting austerely about emperors, triumphs, treaties. Yet in the background, Mule trains hauled packets of dairy across mountain passes, the quiet lifeblood of campaigns. Some scholars argue that Rome's logistical precision was its true genius, more extraordinary than sculptures or gladiator games. And within that logistics, cheese small, reliable, nourishing was essential. There's a quieter truth too. These rations didn't just fuel, they comforted. To chew familiar tastes in foreign soil, to unwrap something aged but recognizably Roman, was to anchor yourself as the empire's representative in a land far from home. Historians still wonder whether local supply lines shifted armies' palates, slowly diversifying, or whether Roman stubbornness demanded their own cheese in every corner. No certainty lingers, but watching these soldiers tuck into satchels, as if into lullabies, you suspect both variations stitched Rome's story together. And what a curious irony, swords get polished into legend, while cheese faded into obscurity. Yet, without it, would these men march tomorrow? Would they joke tonight? Would the empire's boundaries stretch as far as deserts and snowy woods, if not for tiny wedges passed out at dusk? Perhaps Rome is made less of marble than curd. The camp itself proves the point. Earlier games turned cheese into a betting tool, arguments into philosophy, humor into parody. Tonight, it is more than sustenance. It is entertainment, identity, glue. And with every soldier curled protectively around his ration, you see food becoming more powerful than decree. It healed loneliness, shortened distance, smoothed the rough edge of discipline. What emperor ever claimed bread and cheese as their official co-rulers of Rome? None. And yet here they are, crowned silently in the dark. You chuckle faintly to yourself, wondering whether military annals really need amendments. The Battle of Cannae. The Siege of Alesia. The cheese convoy of 36 BC. Absurd on parchment, but perhaps more accurate in spirit. Because if hunger undoes morale, then rations are as decisive as cavalry. Another soldier stirs in sleep, muttering softly about home again. His voice adds weight to your musing. Perhaps the empire wasn't sustained by conquest, but by finding ways to fold comfort into hardship. Tonight, that comfort is cheese. Tomorrow, it might be laughter, or dice rolls, or quiet banter with comrades. Historians argue endlessly over what brought Rome down: corruption, invasion, stretched borders. Yet sitting here now, belly full, the plush odor of cheese still wafting about in pouches, you wonder if the true vulnerability wasn't politics or enemies, but supply. All it would take is broken roads, weakened convoys, one hungry season, to starve ambition. Sleep itself depends on rations. Empires don't collapse in a single dramatic crash. Sometimes they fade because men didn't have enough to eat before laying their heads down. The fires are nearly gone now, just as Rome eventually would be. Yet the camp, quiet and curled with familiar comforts, feels more eternal than marble statues ever did. Perhaps history isn't the roar of generals shouting orders. It's the silent act of men tucking themselves in, holding food like treasure, dreaming into the night. The night deepens, softens. Whatever historians decide, whatever centuries proclaim, your own conclusion slides gently across the silence. When cheese became history, so did Rome, and it never tasted so simple or so tender as it does here. The night has thinned to its final hush. Fires are now nothing but sleeping embers, glowing faintly like forgotten jewels tucked quietly into clay. The soldiers have sunk into complete stillness. An army collapsed, not in battle, but in comfort, like dominoes tipped gently over by bread, exhaustion, and the iron pull of dark skies. Even the guards shuffle less now, their pacing slowed to a meditative glide. as though the entire legion has conceded the world to silence. Asterisk around you. The evidence of humanity lies scattered on the ground, sandals tipped on their sides, helmets doubling as makeshift stools, dusty crusts of bread left untouched, and beside each soldier, his cloak wrapped tightly, satchel pulled close in the night's embrace, with cheese inside like a secret reliquary. It's strangely tender, the Empire's conquering machine revealed as a dormitory of dreaming men who cling to rations as though they were the last treasures on Earth. Asterisk, you breathe deeply. The scent familiar now. Musk from wool cloaks, ashes dissolving into cold air, and faint still lingering temps of dairy. It's incredible how far such a simple smell travels, how much it threads into memory. Perhaps one day these soldiers will march elsewhere, and years later, when a cook unwraps a wheel of cheese in some distant outpost, the taste will pull them instantly back to this very night, this hush, this laughter gone quiet, this empire asleep against dirt floors. Asterisk, the silence deepens into something sacred. You realize there's a paradox here. Rome is remembered as relentless motion, always marching, always building, always conquering. But here, tonight, Rome is stationary, stilled entirely, reduced to the steady succession of snores and soft breaths. Collapsed ambitions deflate into harmony, an empire running not on speeches, but on dreams. Asterisk, there's a fragile beauty to it, looking out over the heaps of shields and cloaks. You could be forgiven for mistaking this for a massive family gathered under stars. Individual identities blurman, who argued fiercely about goats or cows, who placed dice bets, who smirked through their porridge, now lie quietly alike. Battle scars and threats mean nothing. Broken sandals and worn cloaks take center stage. They've melted into a blanket of humanity, and it's stunning how stillness shows their truest power. Asterisk, you wonder, did the empire crumble one day much like this? Not with a clash of swords or dramatic trumpet calls, but with men too tired, too fed, too human to keep carrying ambition forward. Historians still debate, was the fall of Rome truly political collapse, or was it fragility that had always existed in tents just like these? Exhaustion, hunger, quiet. How many nights of silence carried the empire across eras, as vital as battles? Asterisk, what you know is this. Tonight, in this camp, victory belongs to the blankets and dreams, and when morning comes, the soldiers may rise, stretch, bicker again about cheese, shoulder their shields, but this precise silence will vanish. Only night knows how softly Rome falls asleep. Asterisk, you exhale slowly, accepting it too, with embers whispering their final sparks, with cloaks pressed flat into soil. With no voice daring rise, the empire itself feels hushed. Tonight, Rome is asleep, and, in its dreams, it is merely human.